Hello, friends. Welcome to Kudomusicology. It's Friday. The reason that things are running late is when I opened up my PowerPoint today, it only had 2 slides in it, even though I did it several weeks ago. So I'm rebuilding that real quick. But in the meantime, here's Andrew Powell. Welcome back.
Hello, Dana and everybody.
I got a few more copy pastes to do here. At least I have like excellent notes. So rebuilding it can happen relatively quickly. But yeah, you know, you can be really organized and even have wonderful like network storage in your home and still have things fail on you. Who knows? Who knows what I did? But luckily I had everything, and we're just going to kind of go from here. But in the meantime, it is so good to have you back. The last time we had you on, we talked about the horror game with the kids in the cabin. What is it called?
Until dawn.
Thank you.
We
Can you tell that I am not at fighting
we
fighting weight today? I am.
we killed a bunch of people, and today I guess we're going sort of the opposite end of the spectrum.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, this is going to be a fun one today, which you'll see PowerPoint in a moment. I'm on the last thing. Oh, it is what it is. It's this is
It's
this is not a paid gig yet. So,
we'll get you sponsored by Tito's or something.
ooh, like like the vodka.
Yeah,
Do they make other stuff too, don't they?
we'll find out after we get you sponsored.
I don't know if that's a good sponsorship for me. I feel like it should be something I'm more connected to.
We'll, we'll
Okay.
have to do a sampling for you.
I've had it like in stuff, I think, but definitely not my normal jam. There it is. Look how pretty it is.
So well done.
Um, so this is our. Let me. You're seeing it on stream, but like, let me share it to you. Switch screen. There we go. That's better. Hello. All right. So this is historical narratology and the hymn of the Fayth in Final Fantasy X, a game which I started and abandoned because of the stupid sphere grid and how stressful it was. Everyone's like, stick with it, and I'm like, no. Too many games to play in this lifetime, right? Not enough time. So this is in the music of Nobuo Uematsu in the Final Fantasy series. This is our kind of March spotlight here on this book, and so this is the third chapter that we're looking at, and this one has kind of an interesting genesis. So I just having talked to you a little bit before the stream, and then reading through it, you may notice that there are two authors listed. So the first question I had, for Andrew was, who's Sam? I haven't met Sam. and to hear a little bit about like how this originally started. So do you want to speak to that, or do you want me to summarize what you told me?
Um, I think for safety's sake, we'll let you go ahead and discuss that.
Okay, so this is really, really interesting. It just goes to show you, on this channel, we feature sort of every kind of like publication process. So what happened here was Sam proposed this chapter on Final Fantasy X, Hymn of the Faith specifically, I imagine. I don't know what he
Yes.
sent you, but and he sent Rich a draft. I think, like 1,500 words, something like that, but had to leave the project, but still wanted the stuff included, or maybe Rich, made the decision he still wanted this work represented. And so
Yes.
Rich actually reached out to you at that point.
Yes.
How did you and Rich met to
We
make that
first
happen?
met in Hartford at NACFAGUM, and we then crossed paths again at Music in the Moving Image, where I was discussing again narrative and video game music. And at the same time, I was doing a completion run of Final Fantasy X, and he remembered my work at NACFAGUM and had seen me discussing both narrative as well as Final Fantasy X, and mentioned that he had a problem involving a book chapter for a Final Fantasy project that he was working on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I became involved in the project.
Mm-hmm. So obviously you were playing through it. You knew the game pretty well, but then the draft, I guess, was turned over to you and kind of like, here, incorporate whatever you want to. And
Yes.
I'm guessing you were given pretty free reign at that point.
Yes.
Yeah. So as Andrew explained to me, there's like about 50 words maybe of that original draft that kind of ended up in Andrew's kind of intro materials. Yes. But obviously, without communication, because Sam had left the project, there wasn't really a sense of where Sam was necessarily going to go with that research, right?
Yes.
So it means that Andrew was kind of given this project and sort of the topic, right? It wasn't just right on Final Fantasy X; it was right on Hymn of the Fayth.
Correct.
So then you're like, okay, cool. Now what? So Andrew had to kind of go through and figure out an in for it, figure out his own approach to all of this. So I think it's particularly fascinating to have that be how a publication comes into being. We know that we have people that have been invited to contribute to things before, and sometimes even with very specific topics, but this is just like, I've never heard anything like this. So such a different story. But I know that I'm sure Rich was super grateful to you to get this turned around, and I'm sure some things would have been similar had this been more of a co-authored or more of a trade-off than it had been, but it could have shaped up a little differently. So this is Andrew's take on the Final Fantasy X Hymn of the Fayth, which I don't really know much about this game, so as I said, I rage quit. So anyway, that's the story behind that one. How was the editing process with Rich and everything? Pretty good?
It went very well. A lot of it was just a matter of, especially because you mentioned the unique approach to becoming involved in the process, and it wasn't essentially working with my idea, but here was a general framework. Can we work something with it? So essentially building into that idea. So the editing process was almost backwards in that regard.
Yeah, there was like almost a structure in place, but then of course, I'm sure you theoried it. Is Sam a theorist? I don't know what Sam's background is.
No, Sam was a composer.
Oh, okay. So I'm sure some of your approach to, especially the chant comparisons here gets pretty in the weeds with with some of the.
Yes.
The finalis and everything. We'll get there. It's fun.
None
it made
of that
me very happy.
None of that was in the original proposal.
Right.
It wasn't in the original discussion. That was all manifested from the kernel of, we're connecting it to a religious idea. So if that's the route that we're going to take, then let's see how far we can grow that.
Yeah, I love that was sort of how you took and ran with that. And as you mentioned to me too, kind of like coming in clutch and helping make this chapter still happen despite there being a hiccup in the process has led to some potential other opportunities. So like it can plant seeds in other ways too.
Yes.
There's something about being somebody that can come in and help when someone needs it, when someone needs a chapter on a particular topic. That's always a good thing to get good faith with not only your editors and the people you're working with, but like the publishers too can sometimes hear a little bit about that, and that can lead to good things down the line.
We'll try to make this more stable.
All right. So we know Final Fantasy games have worlds. We build those worlds. They have social structures. They have iconography. They have politics. They have religion.
I'm moving, so
into that
me.
world.
Sorry, everybody.
No worries. And they are, of course, not always cut from whole cloth. They are often drawing some inspiration from things in our world, our institutions. So this chapter is going to be looking at the music of the Yevon. Is it Yevon? Yevon?
Yevon.
Yevon. Yevon Fayth in Final Fantasy X from 2001. So the scenario writer, Kazushige Nojima, detailed the mythos for Yevon, and it borrowed concepts from a number of real-world religions: Buddhism, Shintoism, Catholicism, Islam. And the Fayth really does have quite a depth of lore to it, and historical significance, and so it kind of takes after the Catholic Church in the sense of being woven into the fabric of society for generations, and sort of the power of the institution. So we have this Catholic power structure, but then we also have some elements of Buddhist ritual and iconography and Shinto temples and kagura, the music and dance to pacify the spirits, or kami. And so Andrew writes, this internal-external duality is mirrored by Yevon's practitioners. The internal leaders of the Fayth have hidden the dark secrets of the religion and true nature of the world. Uh-oh. While the external followers remain blissfully unaware and blindly follow their faith in the hopes of salvation. This promulgation of atonement through specific religious doctrine, damnation for diversion from the word, and physical suppression of those deemed heretical closely parallels the Catholic Church's own past. Spicy.
I will readily admit this was a very, very challenging topic, and just a general approach to take, dealing with religious ideas and iconography, as well as it's going to have a naturally biased slant to it coming from a Western perspective. So it's trying to find a safe balance and saying that it's addressing religion, but also doing it essentially from an outsider's perspective within both ideas, that it's not a religious investigation of the religion or within the religion. We're looking at it from a strictly historical perspective. We're looking at it from a strictly narratological or a strictly story perspective, and not making claims about religion itself. And so it was a very, very difficult topic to approach in that regard.
I can only imagine. And the focus on the music really, really helps weave this all together. So the history behind Spira's the world, right? So the central religion of Spira, the Yevon religion, does have a strong parallel to orthodoxy in the real world, and the influence of this history on the music is interesting because it is kind of similar to what we see in terms of historical progression. So the foundational religious theme is this hymn of the faith with a Y. Embraces an origin as a Western liturgical chant in design and function, but its incorporation and evolution through the narrative reveals a near identical trajectory that mimics reality. Led by protagonist Titus, the group of guardians protecting the summoner Yuna uncovers the gradual corruption of the Western-influenced hierarchical power structure and teachings. A genuine investigation of the central themes of the score not only embraces this in-game function, but also draws from historical antecedents and liturgy. Contextualizing the various settings of the central chant exposes the entwined narrative and historical implications that unveil Yevon's corruption, leading to the religion's rejection and dissolution. Spoiler alert, that's how the game ends. Sorry. Permanent spoiler warning on this channel. Also, this game's from 2001. How long? What's the statute of limitations on spoilers?
I think 10 years.
Okay, so we're good. The dissection of the chant's text reveals that the practice, firmly entrenched in Eastern religious influences, supersedes the authority of humanity and its corruptive effect in its pursuit of power. So that's our thesis and walkthrough. Unless you tell me I'm wrong. I feel like, no, that's not my thesis.
No, that is all of it in a mouthful. It's definitely not a nutshell.
I'm okay with that. I like a thorough walkthrough statement. I think it's clearer, especially for something complicated, or at least this seems more complicated because it's not a game I was super familiar with, and like it's a decently complex plot too. So like you
Yes.
have to summarize a lot here.
Yeah, it was impossible to address any of this without delving into a far too complex web.
Yeah, this is what Ryan Thompson says about his Kingdom Hearts chapter. It's like, ugh, how do I quickly do the Kingdom Hearts franchise?
It's when the heart of the argument itself, let alone the game, but just the argument itself is the religion, and it has such a complicated story. You have to both explain the entire game as well as explain the entire religion behind the game.
Mm-hmm.
uh, you lose a good third of the space available to you because you have to dedicate all of that time to explaining all of the intricate elements associated with that before you can get into um, before you can actually get into the argument itself.
They're talking about spoilers in the chat. It's funny. Yeah, a lot of this you don't find out until pretty far into the game.
Right. No,
Um,
it's yeah, you
because
the
it's just the
whole
status quo. It's
right.
and there's
The whole
hierarchy where like the lower ones might not have any sense of what's going on. It's not like everyone in the church is hiding this thing. It's mostly the upper echelons of the church.
right. You the whole thing is the journey and you're on the pilgrimage, and then at about the 80 to 90% story completion point, all of this is thrust upon you, and you just have to swallow this big pill of
Mm-hmm.
exposition. And so I now have to take that exposition pill and throw it all at you here in the first
Yeah.
third.
So speaking of which, the game does give us a sense of the birth of the faith and also the process by which it became corrupt. So the faith is named for you, Yevon, a summoner who lived 1,000 years before the events of the game in the city of Xanarkand. Xanarkand? Xanarkand? I don't know.
Xanarkand. Yeah.
Xanarkand, home of the summoners. And I believe these are the ruins, right, of Xanarkand behind
Yes.
us in the background.
Yes.
I figured this out. Yeah, I'm kind of with Pete actually. I don't get really worked up over spoilers. I can't think of anything where I've been really excited to find it out for myself and had it spoiled and had it ruined. I generally, by the time I get around to actually playing a game, I forget. I don't remember that it was ever spoiled for me, or it's still the journey ends up being as important here. Yeah, that's.
Mm-hmm.
But spoilers are important. My husband is not on that train. He won't even, when like TV shows do the like last week on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, he thinks those are spoilers because they point you in the direction, like maybe a character shows up that you haven't seen in a while in that like previously on Buffy, and then you're like, oh shit, like they're coming back, something's gonna happen. So he considers that to be a spoiler because of the way that the framing of the previously on is trying to catch you up but also point you to what's gonna happen.
I will say, if somebody had spoiled the end of season 1 of The Good Place for me, I would have been furious. That would be my one spoiler.
Yeah, I can't think of like. I wish I had had more spoilers when I first got into Outlander. It's amazing how many people are like, oh, it's like the sexy time travel show with the Scotsman and look how beautiful he is. And they don't tell you like how triggering. There are some like for anyone who hasn't watched Outlander is like considering it. It's a good show. The books are also, I think, very interesting. For anyone that's thinking like, oh, bodice ripping romance, like buckle up for 700 pages of Scottish history before you get that stuff peppered in, but you also have to really be committed to the rest of the book or you won't make it through. But yeah, that was a show I wish I had spoiled a little bit because there's some pretty intense assault scenes. Like, just a warning, if you ever think about doing Outlander, it's very fun in a lot of ways, but there are some intense moments, and it's not only in that first season. Yeah, the first few books are. I ended up reading. I think they're not even done yet. It's like Game of Thrones, so I read most of them, and they were fine. At some point, you kind of hit like, okay, can any more things happen to these same two characters, and they still survive? And like, really, all of these things happen to the same two people. How are they alive? But anyway, that's an Outlander sidebar. Has nothing to do with this. Point being, spoilers. All right, so when Yevon was in Zanarkand 1,000 years ago, there was it? Did they say Machina or?
Yeah, Machina.
Okay. See, I didn't get far enough into the game. The Machina war with the city of Bevel, which had superior weaponry, or Machina, Deus Ex. I know this is a little tiny, but I did my best. So this is a quote, which is why it's big. So to ensure the persistence of Zanarkand's memory, Yevon ordered the surviving residents of Zanarkand to relinquish their physical forms and become Fayth. So they're kind of turning into like these spirit creatures, right? Fayth. Whose souls would be sealed in statues in a perpetual dream state. And this would allow Yevon to conjure a utopian version of Zanarkand removed from its attackers as well as the rest of the planet's mainland. So we're kind of like creating a new utopia. To protect himself from harm during the state of summoning, he creates armor for himself, a creature known as Sin. They didn't even try to like change that one, huh? Like, really? We changed everything else.
There is nothing subtle.
There's nothing subtle here. Yeah. So yeah, Sin with a capital S. And creating and then maintaining the dream Zanarkand as well as generating Sin, that quickly destroyed Yevon's humanity. And he, as Sin, is like him but not him, right? Destroyed the original Zanarkand, Sin, and hence the ruins behind us. I actually, when I knew I was going to have the two Final Fantasy X projects because we looked at Stefan's last week and then yours. Stefan's is pretty and yours is like the ruins because I figured that was more your aesthetic.
Yes. Thank you. The Tonberry appreciates the destruction that he's brought forth.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because Stefan's is like, yay, polished concert music, like this beautiful concerto made out of this piece, and yours is like, this religion gets toppled.
Oh yeah.
And this already Zanarkand is in ruins probably when we come across it in the game. Yes. So Sin continues to roam the seas. I'm kind of picturing him like a sea dragon.
You're very close. It's like an enormous sea whale, pretty much.
So yeah, I don't know how that works as like armor, but was it like he was in the belly of the whale, like Star Tropic style?
It's kind of like Godzilla, just less lizardy and more whale-like. So if Moby Dick had crossed paths with Godzilla.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so really we've just created a kaiju here.
Yes, exactly.
Drop your favorite kaiju in chat, everyone.
Yeah. So this is the literal original Sin in Final Fantasy X.
Yeah.
Again, no subtlety.
Now I want to see a crossover. I really like Mothra, but I also really like King Ghidorah as well.
Oh yeah.
Like just such an excellent. Yeah. Joe and I have like a collection of not every Godzilla film, but like most of them. So we've watched a lot of terrible ones, but they're kind of still wonderful. Oh, Rodan's. Yeah, some great Eren Yeager. Yep. Love to see it. Great films. Good fun to watch. Sin is less fun, as we can imagine, because he's original Sin here. So he's roaming the seas in his whale-like form, targeting areas of high populations or gatherings, as well as locations that used Machina or displayed advancements in technology. So because we were fighting a war against folks that had superior technology, this creature being kind of made to protect against that, it's almost like in Futurama how the Santa bot is like set to judge everybody as too naughty. And so he has lasers and stuff and will attack everyone, and they all have to hide from Santa instead of being excited about Xmas in that series. That's kind of how I'm picturing this. That Sin is roaming around being like, technology bad.
Yeah.
I have to filter everything through everything else because I haven't played this game.
That's a pretty close comparison. There's one race of people known as the Albed that use technology regularly, and they live on, a distant land that aren't as regularly affected because they're so far away. But yeah, that's a really good apt comparison.
Also, Santabot is so fun in
Oh,
Futurama.
absolutely.
He's great. Um, so despite sin being a constant threat, but there is this period of peace that we can achieve. And Yevon apparently had a daughter. Do they ever mention like who Lady Unalesca's mom is? Is she also a summoner? Do they even say?
I don't remember them going into Yevon's wife or Lady Unalesca's mother.
Yeah.
Someone, yeah.
It's annoying. Anyway, he has a daughter, and
So
the
we
process of go ahead.
we could again tie that into once again, that would have made an excellent thing to add, how you know all the terms are leaving me now, but that the birth of Jesus without genuine or immaculate conception, that
Mm-hmm.
in this case it's sort of reversed, that this deity, if you will, didn't have an actual mother, or the maternal presence wasn't there in this case for the perpetuation of the religion itself.
Yeah, that's really interesting too because of the way the religion gets structured
Hmm.
subsequently. So there's a process called the final summoning. It seems like it's like Final Fantasy though. Or it seems like this can happen. I don't know. It felt almost like this could happen more than once, like in
Hmm.
different periods. Um,
Yeah.
did I read that correctly? So like,
Yes.
okay,
So
so
the
someone who shares a deep bond with a summoner completes a pilgrimage and becomes the Fayth for the final Aeon for this final summoning, and then that Fayth is capable of piercing Sin's armor. So then we can defeat the creature, at least for a while, and bring upon a period known as the Calm.
correct.
But this can happen more than once, so it's like Final Fantasy.
Right.
It's
It
funny
would
that
be
it's the final summoning, but it's like,
right.
how many
It
finals are there?
it would be temporary, and they don't, if I remember correctly, they don't give an exact amount of time of how long the calm lasts.
Right.
But having this idea that a period of calm was possible would give the people hope. And
Yeah.
so, at least having either a generation or having a period of time where there was no sin or there was no persistent threat was something that the people could look forward to and believe in, even though sin would ultimately return. Knowing and having a record of a calm and somebody bringing the calm was what the people strive for.
Yeah. So after doing this final summoning and defeating Sin, Lady Unalesca remained in the ruins of Xanarkand as an unsent. So unlike a Fayth that's like in the statue, a perpetual dream state, has certain powers that they're kind of conveying there. An unsent is sort of like a ghost that hasn't crossed over, like spiritual
Correct.
remnants of the deceased who have not crossed over to the gathering place for the dead, which is known as the far plane in this game.
Right.
So Unalesca's form is just kind of hanging out in Xanarkand in the ruins, and is there purely to, if there's a summoner that can make the pilgrimage, be like, here's how you do this, and now you can bring about the next calm, and you can defeat Sin, and hooray!
Right. And I encourage Stefan to correct me if I'm not remembering correctly. But they do address this, the whole thing with the unsent and the fiends or the monsters that you typically fight, the fiends that you see in the game are actually people that had died that were originally unsent, but they did not cross over to the far plane, and their souls or their spirits that had not been sent eventually turned into fiends. Those whose spirits remained as unsent had such a strong desire to live on Spira remained as unsent, hence why Lady Unalesca never ultimately left nor changed into a fiend.
Yeah.
So they sort of make the creatures that you're battling actually canon and part of the world as former people that, well, essentially Sin had killed at this point.
It's heavy.
Yeah.
So, in the calm, I guess I should have capitalized calm. In the calm, people begin to repair Spira, and Bevel, and they're avoiding Machina because when Sin eventually returns, he's gonna destroy it all. So what's the point? So we are kind of being kept in a perpetual state of tradition, as opposed to technological advancement. And so in this process, after this first calm, we build a whole religion around Yevon and Lady Unalesca, and the true story ends up getting lost. So he becomes honored as the beacon of hope against evil that punishes the world. So it's interesting how Lady Unalesca seems the one that should be honored as the beacon of hope, given the story. But you haven't, of course, put a lot of this together and created the dream Xanarkand and stuff. But seems to get. It just goes to show you that we're putting a lot more stock in his role. But it's. How much does the average person know about Lady Unalesca's part in this? They would know about the calm and the final summoning, right?
Right.
Yeah. So it's all in there.
Yeah.
So their souls dissipate after you beat them. Interesting.
They're aware that there is a final summoning, but
they don't realize the true nature of it, which
correct.
We haven't even said yet.
Right.
But yes, so Sin, instead of being sort of this armor byproduct of Yevon's summoning, ends up being framed by the temple and for the religion as a sign of people's impurity. Like Sin came from us, kind of in a way, instead of Yevon made Sin, and could only be cleansed by atoning. So sounds like a lot of religions. Religions are telling you about here's what it means to us to be a good person, and there are mechanisms by which you can recognize I'm a person and I'm not going to be perfect, and I'm going to screw up at this, and so there are mechanisms in place for you to atone, whether that's an action or a confession or a combination. And so similarly, we have that here. So this is also a way to prevent Machina from being rebuilt and restored, because we don't want to invoke the wrath of Sin. So we're all trying to live right here and avoid impurity ourselves, because that is something that, I don't know, could attract Sin, perhaps.
Yeah, it would. It literally attracts Sin, because those locations or individuals that use the forbidden machina do attract Sin. And there's even a situation in the game where people use the forbidden machina as a means to attract Sin in battle.
That's intense. So that's some mess. That's a lot to be messing with. But here's where it really gets intense. Here's what the church isn't telling everyone. The final destination of this pilgrimage in Xanarkand ruins, where Lady Unalesca's hanging out, revealing the truth of the final summoning, so that the summoner that does that is gonna be killed. Straight up, they do not survive. And they will in time ultimately turn into the next Sin. So you think, oh, I thought we destroyed Sin and we have a calm, so how does Sin come back? It's because we get a new one. So Sin could not be defeated, only halted. And the temple and the church were well aware of this, but had buried this within the leadership.
And the final Aeon is one of the summoner's guardians. It's somebody that they have to have a very close bond with. So it's the summoner is not only dying, somebody that they are intimately connected with has to become the next sin. So it's a 2-for-1 blow.
Yikes. That's intense. So Hymn of the Fayth is kind of a central piece, central chant in this religion. And for it to be a narrative device, obviously the player has to recognize it as it appears in multiple guises, but also as a religious object or an icon. Let's see what Burdick is telling me here. Titus, who's the player POV character, is told that info about the Guardian becoming sin and the summoner dying immediately after. Oh! So he's like, welp. I guess
I'm already
it's me,
going down
then.
one difficult path, Ryan. Let's. How many religions and how many sins do I have to?
Well, there you go. So literally intimate here, relationship with Yuna. So could not be any clearer that it's not just, they make puppy dog eyes at each other on their journey.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Well, there you go. They are in a relationship, and so that means Titus is in danger. So you, as a player, are in danger of bringing this about, unless you can figure out a way around it, which seems to be how a lot of these games go, right? Something might be a prophecy. Yeah, it does sound complicated. Anyway, the music. Now we're on the music. So the game signifies that the hymn itself is this religious icon in several ways. So you mentioned Claudia Gordman here in how music provides meaning to the visuals. And you argue, and this is something I argue too, reverse is true too, right? Musical cues can gain meaning and context from visual information. So in addition, the modification or layering of additional implications may be achieved independent of or in conjunction with such visual setting. So I give examples. Oh, you're losing me? Hello? Is my microphone dying? You're losing me on Skype. Do you want me to call you back? Pete can hear me. Stream can hear me. But Andrew's losing me. Well, it's no good if Andrew can't hear. So let me say, maybe hang up. Oh, there we go. Lost Andrew. We'll try again. Womp womp.
Hello?
Hi. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No worries. Stream was like, we hear you. I was like, oh, okay. Something's happening with Skype. Something's always happening with Skype.
Sorry.
So yeah, the idea of like music inflects the image inflects the music.
Yes.
So I like to give, an example of if you have a flower field and there's a happy little bunny jumping and then you put like really ominous music underneath that, you're immediately thinking, oh no, what's going to happen to the happy little bunny, right?
Yes.
But at the same time, and this is a more concrete example, I should come up with like a good real world example of, I just like the happy bunny one. The other example I tend to give like my students when I talk about this is a film can completely ruin a song for you.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
For me, I can't ever hear Stuck in the Middle with You again because of Reservoir Dogs, because of that torture sequence. Like, it's a happy song outside of that film. So you can take something really upbeat and cheerful and turn it into something else by what you're pairing it with. So seems obvious, but important to point that this is a relationship that works both ways. Obviously, a lot of us are going to prioritize music, doing things to the image and changing how we perceive the image, but both are really salient and important here.
Yeah, one of the examples I've often used is playing the Super Mario Brothers theme and then pulling up gameplay of Sonic the Hedgehog, and suggesting that, the music isn't necessarily wrong. It just doesn't belong in the quote unquote narrative world of Sonic the Hedgehog. And we can immediately identify that it doesn't belong, even though it's, or maybe a good term is incongruous to it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Love it. Yeah, we're definitely a Skype fam here, Pete. We do it for our streams too. And honestly, we're not that dedicated to it either. Like, Ryan has often said, if Discord can just figure out like splitting NDI feeds better, then we will 100% abandon Skype. It's just that Skype works pretty well with a lot of these programs, where you can isolate everybody's NDI feed, which is important for streaming purposes, so that our audio isn't all messed up. We're not talking over each other, that kind of a thing. So we've had issues. So we mostly use Discord just for sharing game footage and stuff. But that's Skype for you. So yeah, Skype and Zoom and Discord and all these things that we've gotten good at in the past few years. Okay. Well, there you go. Yeah. Skype is the industry broadcast standard for interviews yet, because it does NDI nonsense natively. Yep. NDI can be quite nonsensical, as any of us who have ever opened up XSplit or OBS can tell you. Just getting a basic stream. There's a reason streamers we like our same setup over and over again. At some point I'll probably overhaul and do like little like frames for the windows and stuff, make it look really cute. But that requires a bit of time, doesn't it? It requires time when I'm not otherwise putting on weekly streams, so I can like mess with my layout a little bit. Maybe when I'm not teaching, maybe over the summer I can do some things. Summer of Summers can get an overhaul for our next season here. So our hymn itself, Principal Melody, is first heard on Besed Island. Again, just guessing because I haven't heard the voice acting, which I know is in this game because Stefan told us last week. It's like the first time we had a voice in a Final Fantasy game is Titus being like, listen to my story. So I know that. So Principal Melody's heard in the temple. Titus is completing the Cloister of Trials and approaches the party protecting the summoner Una. So he's like trying to join the party, like be one of these people that's going to help her get to where she's going on the pilgrimage. Yeah. Okay.
He's originally left out, and he just essentially breaks his way in, and
he wants to be included.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Una at that moment is praying to the Fayth of the An Valifor. So, and we can hear the chant sung like Gregorian chant by a solo female voice. And these, in this, it's not Una singing. It's not like diegetic in that way, but it's understood. It's only performed by the Fayth themselves, like they're like statue spirits. And the voice is understood as, quote, reflective of the physical representations of the human bodies that imbue the summoners of Ans. I thought I was going to lose you for a second there. I got that like Skype struggle noise. So I actually got these in here as I was rebuilding here. 5 primary versions of the chant. So here's the Valifor, the first one that we hear. Goes from there. We'll just hear the kind of incipit of all these, right? So like to hear some of these different versions, some familiar names in here from other Final Fantasy games. So if we're here, we have a relatively young, physically imposing male tenor. Phyrexian is a muscular, large male who's baritone bass. Okay, Shiva is a mature female soprano. So surprisingly high voice for being presented as someone you might expect to have a slightly lower mezzo, maybe. Nice vibrato there. And Bahamut, young male child alto, which I love Ryan's point here in chat about the having, generally Bahamut is one of the most powerful summons in every game, is usually some kind of huge creature. So having a boy soprano here for this last version we'll listen to kind of points us to castrati, right? And sort of the power of that voice, which has its use in Catholicism, not just opera. So we definitely had choirs that incorporated castrati. What was it, the 1840s it finally gets outlawed? 18 something.
Especially making the argument of the origins of the religion and the origins of its associations with Gregorian chant and the use of its earliest forms. That's an excellent point that Ryan brings up.
Yeah. And I think Ryan's point too for the Shiva voice being a higher voice, kind of having that kind of colder timbre to it. I think that's a good one. All right, here's Bahamut. Yeah, Martha Feldman's book on castrati's great stuff.
I agree with the association of Shiva and the range with the coldness. The only reason I explicitly didn't go that route, well, there are two, especially when we're looking at sort of the physical characteristics. I could have, but since that wasn't a distinct goal with this association, it was just a little bit superfluous.
Yeah.
And then also with Valfor and Bahamut also being in that higher range, making that sort of timbral association,
it doesn't read for them.
Right, it doesn't get into that and blurs the line a little bit.
Yeah,
so
you're doing enough in this chapter. You're packing a lot in here. Oh, fun. That's a fun fact, Pete. Yeah, we read some of Feldman's book in our gender seminar a couple semesters ago. Yeah. And Bardic Knowledge, Ryan, Megan's talk is being published in the next SMT. What's the name of the journal? I have a lot of brain fog today.
Is it the print one or the
online? I think.
MTO.
Julianne was the Julianne would know. I know Julianne's not here today because Julianne's doing that conference keynote. Yeah. But I think it's going to be, it's like upcoming. So whenever that next one comes out, don't worry. I already have that like on my list to like immediately ask her to be on here. So, because I loved that talk at SMT AMS. So good times. Oh, okay. No, you don't need to hear everybody. That's because I didn't do my normal.
Yeah.
Normally I go through and I set these so they're like click only, it's a whole thing. There are other ones though. Like you think like 5, that's a lot in a game. There's a lot more. Buckle up. This shows up everywhere in this game. So there are also these lost Anns who also have their own versions. And they have some interesting like character arcs that seem a little bit more fleshed out than some of the Fayths. So we have Yojimbo, who's the stolen samurai, who's a baritone. Definitely reads as samurai. I don't know why, it just does. Lovely. And we also have Anima, the grieving mother, who we find out is Seymour Guado's human mother, who willingly gave her life to become his final Anne, but now despairs at her perceived failures to prepare him for his life as a summoner and human/Guado hybrid. That's meant to be mournful. Alto, not also.
Mhm.
I mean, she's also mournful.
She's both.
She's also mournful, but and then finally, we get the Magus sisters, who don't get a monophonic version because the temple where they are housed is a pre-war structure that predates the founding of the Yevon faith, so their lack of a liturgical form of the chant reflects this, which I think is a super cool detail. Oh, yeah, we're doing that again. Well, they're kind of fun to put them in harmony with each other, right? In canon, as it were. All right, so what makes this harken back to Western plain chant? I see that Karen's here. Karen can probably tell you right off the bat. This is Andrew's stab at this. So citing Jeremy Yudkin here with two key features. So one is the unity of text and music in the repertory. The notes mirror the structure of the text. The other is the ability of the music to create pitch centers even though it is monophonic. It is crucial to realize that chant, despite being constructed out of a single line of music, depends upon a highly developed fluid system of pitch goals and expectations. Composers could exploit these for artistic purposes and manipulate them both in obvious and sometimes in extremely subtle ways. The pitch system of the Middle Ages was not the same as that of later music, but it was at least logical and in many ways more colorful. How do you feel about that, Pete, that you can Google Pete Smucker Castrato?
What happens in Florida stays in Florida, Pete.
I've never heard you sing, so I can't confirm or deny what your vocal range actually is. All right, enough shenanigans. We love you, Pete. No disrespect meant. So here, the Hymn of the Faith is using a syllabic text setting. Making text declamation clearer than some kind of a melismatic setting would be. Remember Music History 1, everybody. Pneumatic, syllabic, melismatic, right? And the form appears to be a highly simplified German bar form, so an A prime B phrase design, with each phrase itself divided into two subphrases of A, B, C, B to E, and I did take screenshots of all of these, but of course I didn't put these in here, so maybe I can just drop them in. I wonder if I can do that when it's in this mode. So this does track with medieval hymns. They were set in a syllabic style. I'm not saying that this is literally exactly how it was done in the Middle Ages in the Catholic Church, but there is at least some clarity here. And of course, when you're doing a highly syllabic setting, it has a way of making the text super intelligible versus a melisma you can kind of get lost in. So, we're going to save a melisma for like, I don't know, a big word like God, maybe, something that you can really, really decorate that's like kind of central. So it's not going to necessarily be the best for making people focus on the word itself.
Yeah, and since, as the final section is emphasizing the text, and ultimately what happens with the text is so significant, both in terms of what the original text was and what it becomes, I think makes the syllabic setting even more significant.
Yeah, and I'm going to go ahead and add an image setting. Oh, I can do it directly. Add a new source. Actually, what I want to do instead is do a window capture. One moment, because we should display these beautiful transcriptions that you did. Window capture. Okay, add source. Is that gonna work? Eh? I thought it was gonna work. But you know, the other option is to do this. Interesting. Okay, so we go back. We drop it in. Why not? Gotta find where we were. Okay, there we were. All right. We'll drop it in because it's pretty. We're just going to drop it over everything because I'm not making it its own slide at the moment. Here we go. I'll do this for the other ones as needed. So there you go. That's what it looks like. So Andrew's lovely transcription. I love that you're using like double bar lines to indicate sections and stuff. I just love that kind of... I do that kind of thing too. It just makes sense. It's so clear.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for my Japanese Duolingo enthusiasts out there, you may recognize that some Japanese syllables here, but this is not translated into Japanese. This is not just a Japanese text. It is not a Latin text. It is. We're gonna come back to the text, right?
Yeah.
We've got some things to say about the text. Yeah, Ryan, we're getting there. Trying not to spoil that it was a cipher. It's all right. We're spoiling everything.
Spoiler alert.
Don't worry. It's later. We'll unpack the cipher. Not cipher from earlier Final Fantasy games. not Final Fantasy VIII cipher. He's spelled different. Okay, so syllabic text setting, kind of a bar form. And so the melodic and harmonic design of the chant establishes this plain chant identity for the player, liturgical identity for the player in the narrative. Its relatively compact profile spanning a seventh, closing formulaic patterns identify a clear finalis, or final pitch. Additionally, the centricity of the pitch, a perfect fifth above this finalis, as a logical goal in the second phrase is suggestive of a reciting tone, or confinalis, which further confirms the ancient modality underlying the design. Such melodic/harmonic construction undoubtedly places the chant within the protus-authentic mode, generally described as Dorian from the Greek terminology and the so-called church modes. So before we go on here, Andrew has a beautiful endnote here stressing that using protus-authentic versus Dorian is intentional here to separate the use of modes within early chant and Renaissance or contemporary music settings. So the differences in harmonic vocabulary, closing structures, and the melodic implications through the establishment of the pentachords and confinalis are indicative of the medieval time period. So it's not just... academics gonna academic here.
Yeah, it is not Dorian. It is.
It always jumps back. So here's that.
Pete, I am working on an article that's discussing contemporary analyses of modal music. So please give me some time to finish up a few dozen other writings. But yeah, I firmly believe that we discuss modality wrong, and this is one of the things that I discuss concerning differences of it. So
there it is. There's the protus-authentic mode. Very cool. And then kind of mapping this like a chant, showing the finalis and confinalis. But I really appreciate that end note made me happy. That's why I pulled it out. So it's just like, this is really cool. Because Dorian kind of has a lot of different reference as it goes on. So every presentation, get it done by next spring when I teach counterpoint. We're always like putting each other's work. Will and I are always assigning each other work to do. It's like we're doing our best. We're getting things out.
Fine.
Every presentation of the monophonic version of the hymn as chant, as we may have noticed, occurs in the temples themselves by the Fayth, or the Lost Ands, and performed by the individual Fayth, and only in the chamber of the Fayth after completion of the cloister of trials. So it's very tied to like the innermost sanctum of the church. And then the Fayth is kind of serving here like a priest or a cantor musically. So this is tied to a particularly spiritual experience for our party, and it aligns with Uematsu's origins, but not the teachings that have been created by and propagating from the church. This separation of genuine origin from its evolution is paramount when tracing its appearances throughout the game. References, disruptions, and significant alterations to the established cultural codes of the music mirror narratological, internal, as well as social, external conflicts of religious ideologies, adding significant meaning to the overall plot. So we don't only get monophony. And the places where we don't get monophony is very interesting and instructive. So, Hymn of the Fayth. Topic theory again. Can't escape it this term.
Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. At least I'm engaging with it with folks that do it well. So this was also, I had some moments in here where I was like, there's some things here that are like clarifying topic theory for me even more, because I've often struggled with it, because I feel like it often is not done well. Or the biggest problem, as I've cited before, is that tropes and topics get conflated, even by the people who are ostensibly doing that work. And then that makes it really hard to kind of understand what these things are doing. So actually, you do a really good job here of explaining it to me. So thank you for teaching me. So the hymn of the Fayth itself aligns with kind of the Hatton definition of a topic, complex musical correlation originating in a kind of music used as a part of a larger work. But you go on to mention David Lidov, defining topics as richly coded style types which carry features linked to affect, class, and social occasions such as church styles, learned styles, and dance styles. In complex forms, these topics mingle, providing a basis for musical allusion. Ryan's being really pedantic in the chat.
He's being pedantic. So they're still hearing it from the temple and from
from
the cantor, if you will.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Half a point to Ryan.
Yeah, half a point. Brian L. Men brings up the importance of opposition in developing topics, that topics have to stand out from each other, from other musical elements in order to be clear. You have to be able to apprehend that this is a musical object for it to be a topic. It doesn't work if you can't do that. Listeners have to recognize and interpret topics, so there is room for error or miscommunication, but also topics are often so established that the contemporary listeners do generally recognize them, even if an outsider to the culture or time period might have trouble recognizing them. Really, really nice way to put that. Very helpful. And now we get troping specifically. Now, this isn't medieval troping, which is the other problem with all of this, and why I get confused. This is not medieval troping. So, contrasting with these established norms, when you take and you juxtapose two or more types, this is troping. So, it's akin to metaphor. Two different formally unrelated types are brought together in the same functional location so as to spark an interpretation based on their interaction. Mix two things together, get new thing. It's a good one. That's my level that I have to put this at for myself.
Yeah.
And of course, David Neumeyer has looked at this process in film and describes topics as more stable signifiers. Again, they have to be recognizable or they don't work. Tropes themselves are shifting, though, because if you combine this topic with this topic, it's one thing, but if you take this topic and combine it with this topic, you get something else.
Yes.
So the tropes themselves can be shifting, they can be creative, they can produce all these new meanings through their fusion and juxtaposition. This was very helpful, just this whole rundown of how all these people define these things. I appreciated it so much. So we have the original chant, firmly rooted in Catholic liturgy. The manipulation and distortion of the theme throughout the game reveals an interesting trajectory, kind of a progression along some musico-historical pathways. So significant modifications in key features of the theme, identifiable through various topics, tropes, and codes, musical, filmic, and ludic, provide a unique relationship between the history of the in-game religion and the evolution or corruption of its Western-influenced hierarchy over time, in conjunction with the developments of primarily liturgical and eventually secular music that blossomed from its original kernel. This Western influence and history are simultaneously cast in conflict with the Eastern practices that permeate Yevon's overall design, creating an amalgamation that directly confronts the discord between structure and practice, imperialism and traditionalism. So now it's going to get really interesting. We're going to see kind of what happens. So the first time we hear the melody, not in the hymn form, but outside, the first time we hear it isn't the hymn form. You encounter the hymn form after this other one. It's outside of the Besaid Temple, where the followers are praying to statues of summoners who had previously defeated sin. Again, should be capital sin. Sin. And we hear Song of Prayer, which is a choral setting, kind of like a Lutheran chorale, harmonizing the chant. Do I have that? And I just didn't drop it in. Let me look. I think this was the one I had a hard time finding, and I needed to look it up on YouTube.
Yeah.
Okay, and when I found it on YouTube, when I went to go put it in just now, the
like
video had been taken down.
Minute.
No, the video had been taken down. So,
oh, wow.
Just picture a Lutheran chorale version of it.
This one is so popular, people have done like 1 hour and 4 hour video settings of it on loop.
Mm-hmm.
Just because fans have enjoyed it so much.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I could. Yeah, shoot me the link. We'll listen to it. Since it is so popular. And so having this almost like the Lutheran chorale style harmonization is kind of mirroring 600 to 7-year progression here from the original form of the chant to something being set this way. And it also projects the idea of like the actual experience of those who worship the religion, the communal experience through identifying with the religion and singing this together, which is cool. It's kind of what chorales are about too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, be having the congregation sing. Facebook DM, Ryan. I don't have Facebook open. Hold on. We're back in like 2001 here, not even 2010. So I guess it's fine. Okay, I do have a YouTube capture window that I can probably do if I can find it. Well, there we go. Isn't that nice? I guess we don't particularly need to see it, but I'm going to Alt-Tab and just hide a little bit of the bottom there. Okay, here's this one.
Yeah, there's one of the 1 hour versions.
Pretty. I won't play too much. I'm going to get copyright struck as it is on this. I guarantee you. It's okay because YouTube uploads are intriguingly, they don't necessarily silence you. I think I've talked about this before, especially if you're not monetizing. So it helps to be the poor academic. And it also helps like how long or how much of it are you playing? Like, how are you presenting it? Are you talking over it? Are you doing other things? So that doesn't always save you completely, but it does help a little bit. But I feel like this is one that might get struck. I don't know. It's also why we didn't really play anything from for Stefan's last week for the same reason, because I was like, ooh, I don't know about this. Some things I feel cagier about. I don't know. We'll see. I will be very interested to see if it comes up. But I'm also okay with like the however small number of people that watch my channel giving the advertiser money to whoever owns that content. That's fine too. Like, you're going to see ads anyway, so unless you have YouTube Premium or whatever. All right, so that's our communal version. The text of the chant wasn't translated like into their vernacular, but it's newly accessible to the masses outside of just belonging only to the higher beings. It's kind of their own version of it. So this chorale setting is very significant. And so adding these additional voices, having this choral version, we now have a harmonic vocabulary that reveals religious innovations as well as narrative foreshadowing. The harmonies are largely tertian. So pretty far jump here, church history-wise, everybody. Right? Like, it's so English to have thirds and sixths. So we have a lot of tertian harmonies, and characteristic for chorale, even though there is a predilection for the dissonant seventh throughout the melody and the ninth at cadences. So like, ooh, it's a little spicy. Not what we would expect. Let's see. Did you have that one? Song of Prayer, you do. Okay, let me drop it in. Oh, wait, it popped up when I opened it. Look at that. Hooray. Look at that. Oh, I'm so excited.
Yeah, I believe I actually did transcriptions of all of them, and many of them got moved to either a supplemental website or we had to cut them for image reasons.
Yeah. So there it is. There's the lovely. Awesome. Oh, I love that the window capture worked finally. Okay. And I think if I open up new ones, they should work. Okay, so we do get some cadential dissonance, which is a bit foreshadowing, right? The closing, I guess I should have it back up and read this while I do that. The closing structures of the second and third phrases bring elements of the past and future into compressed focus, incorporating quartal, EAD, and quintal, GDA, harmonies that both harken back to early explorations of polyphony and foreshadow the perversion of a critical icon within the church through its voiced dissonance, which we're going to discuss below. So second and third, so like these cadences. The song version, heard in Yevon temples other than Bavel, is heard in Yevon temples other than Bavel. It's a literal separation between it and the sort of genuine liturgical function of the hymn, which makes sense. This is bringing it out to the people and sort of letting it be a symbol of their faith.
Yeah.
So the chorale is a symbol of hope and peace to the faithful, but it's also missing from Bavel, which, if we recall, was who Zanarkand was fighting in the Machina War. So it also shows their corruption, like relative to this whole history, but also the idea that the church isn't connected to this broader Yevon community. The song's appearance following the failed mission of Operation Mi'ihen?
Operation Mi'ihen.
Mi'ihen, as Titus surveys the death and destruction, recalls the original chant's repurposing and evolution into its new chorale form, from a song of defiance against Bavel during the Machina War into a holy song incorporated into scripture for its belief to pacify the unresting deceased. So that's a really interesting moment. All right, so then we get some plot. Sin attacks Kalika, kills a bunch of people. Yuna has to perform a dance called Descending to help those souls cross over to the far plane. The chant here is sung by unison female choir, singing the first phrase, then joined by a male chorus in a unison response. So here we get antiphonal singing. Isn't that cool? Antiphonal chant. So the chant is being answered by, the idea is that it's like being answered by the spirits of the deceased. There's this back and forth. It's notable that while antiphonal singing is part of Catholic Mass, here the antiphon is taking place outside the temple. And we have instruments accompanying Yuna's version. So Eastern percussion like taiko drums, such as the shime daiko and the byo-uchi daiko, and kane metal percussion. So we get some things that wouldn't show up in the church setting, in the temple setting. Let's see. I have that right. Was that one of the there was one that there was a few I couldn't find. The question is, do I remember which version this is here? Because those are the Unalesca ones.
I do have to agree with Stefan here that this is an absolutely beautiful scene.
Yeah.
It's just very well done.
It's possible that I linked it. Maybe not. Well, if somebody slips me that, I'll play it, but I don't see it. There's so many things called Hymn of the Fayth on this soundtrack. Cool scene, though. So the game is blending Catholic chant with military tropes to provide depth to the unfolding narrative by suggesting conflict with the church hierarchy. So now we're going to go see Grand Maester Yo Mika and his theme, which has a more militaristic setting of the hymn that creates dissonance with how he's shown, because when we see him, he's kind of this elderly sage, kind of grandfatherly, and yet we have this kind of militaristic thing, so that's kind of implying the institutional power, right?
Right.
So he gets bombastic brass fanfare march, sort of regal opening drawn from the chants in Chipit, but then becomes much, much more chromatic through a lot of quartal harmony, which creates a lot of dissonance. And then we get addition of bass snare and an increase of tempo by about 20%. So I do have the Maester Mika that I can put in here. Let me do that. Oh, why does it always go back to the first slide? I hate it. I hate it. Is that it? The cadences. Titus. I'm just going to have to remember where I am. 33. Okay. There's that. I'll open the actual Mika 1. Window capture. All right, so if I do this, will it open? You were opening for like a second. That's no fun. Well, I'll just drop this in too. Mika 1. And I think if I make this big, I'll just drop the other one in as we get there. Okay. Oh, why did that stop playing? It's gonna be so elegant. Okay, so hopefully we all heard that. We can all tell. Dissonance, brass, snare, like, there we go. Mixture. We're troping here.
Yeah.
As Mika disembarks from his vessel, he's surrounded by 6 musicians and Maester Seymour Guado. Every time I see Maester now, I think of like Game of Thrones using that as well. One of the later antagonists, we met his mother earlier, you may recall, his poor grieving mother. This setting seems like announcing a royal king, which is a little bit sus, right? Like, it is suggesting his power in the religion, but like, he's not a king. He's a religious elder. So he's being positioned like a monarch of Spira. And Titus even remarks that Mika being maester for 50 years seems like that's too long. And then everyone else is just kind of like shush, you're being inappropriate. Like,
yeah, it's a combination of royalty, regality, militaristic elements. It's a moment that not only emphasizes the importance of the character, but creates such narrative dissonance and Titus or Titus, however everybody wants to call him, really assumes and don't tell Julianne I'm saying this. Like Titus really assumes the player's cognitive dissonance at that point, as he's questioning what's going on, because if this is supposed to be such a peaceful religion, and if we're supposed to be experiencing the calm, why is this so militaristic? Why is this person 50 years old, or has been in power for 50 years? This is too long. So it's that moment of this all seems completely backwards, and the music is really emphasizing it at this point.
Yeah. Mika and the church don't really care about their subjects here. They care about the power. They care about the control that comes from their positions. So this is power. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Right here. This belief ends up being confirmed. Seymour ends up being kept as an unsent following his defeat at the hands of the party, in order to preserve the image of peace and stability within the church. So he doesn't really get a reward for all of his service to the church hierarchy. They're like, no, you're just going to do this for us. Far more importantly, though, it is revealed that Mika is also an unsent. He's been dead this whole time.
Yeah.
Whose death occurred well before the primary events of the main narrative. That's pretty wild. And some folks know this, right? His persistence as the head of the church is tied to the desire for power and control, maintaining false hope over the people of Spira and the church itself. Mika rebukes the party as the true essence of the Yevon, and the ceaseless spiral of death within Spira is revealed in a private trial. And these are Mika's words here. Men die, beasts die, trees die, even continents perish. Only the power of death truly commands in Spira. Resisting its power is futile, just like the Borg. No matter how many summoners give their lives, sin cannot truly be defeated. The rebirth of sin cannot be stopped. Yet the courage of those who fight gives the people hope. There is nothing futile in the life and death of a summoner. Indeed, that is the essence of Yevon. Yevon is embodied by eternal, unchanging continuity summoner. We also discover that Lady Unileska has an unsent form. I mean, we know that she's been hanging out in Centerkind and what her whole role in that. But we get to meet it. And when we discover that, it shakes the entire belief system of the party as they learn the truth behind the final summoning, and what it's going to mean, and the sacrifice and the kind of futility of it, right?
Right.
Titus is going to have to die for a temporary calm, and then just turn into the next sin. That doesn't seem like a good solution. Maybe we can find another way around it. So this moment, we hear an evolved form of the original chant. Lots of parallel fifths, both above and below, which kind of points us to organum, parallel organum, and the emergence of polyphony. And the presence of 3 unique voices and the use of quintal harmony in the first 8 measures, however, far exceed the norms of medieval polyphonic or chordal tendencies, creating a literal harmonic dissonance that matches the narrative dissonance emerging in Unileska's monologue. Oh, that was Unileska's monologue. Apologies that I said that wrong. Okay. All right. What do I need here? I need probably this one. Is that the one? Yes, that's 3 voices. This one. This is what happens when you lose your PowerPoint. You have to reconstruct. This all would have just been sitting in here beautifully. All right, and then him Unileska. Not the alternate, because that's the fun one. The extra fun one. All right, here's this. Very organic. Organic. What? that moment there is definitely what now? That's my, official theory reaction to this. My academic reaction. What now? Oh, mercurial. I like that. Yeah. It's just like, uh-oh. It's a little ominous. The final phrase, the original chant, is removed, and we get a more complex counterpoint. The highest voice preserves a subphrase of the original chant. Transposed at the fifth, the bass voice introduces the same motive and contrary motion, moving this more into 12th century discant, but with parallel thirds suggesting 15th century countenance angloise. I've never known how to say that. That is not my... I'm better at reading languages, y'all, including English. So this whole version compresses time and style, and the very end is, as we saw, incredibly chromatic and abandons all the historical parallels as we start to understand the true nature of what's going on here. So interesting. Yeah, so we can see this progression in this final phrase. So this is not derived from the chant. We have the thirds happening and the sixths, and we have the incredibly chromatic ending.
And again, what really needs to be stressed is that reading is a biased and slanted Western approach.
Yeah.
That's not to say that that's what it is. That is what a historical narratological Western reading will give.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just one interpretation of it. So as always, take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, it would be really interesting to see this done from the opposite perspective.
Exactly.
Like the exact same chapter, like from the other perspective.
Absolutely.
That would be really cool. So after the Una moment, we actually get to approach you, Yevon. We get a distorted version of the hymn with a male baritone manipulated electronically, suggesting the infusion of machina into the church. Uh-oh. Isn't that going to attract sin? But it will make you more powerful. So
well, we are in sin at this point, so
yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. I guess maybe this is like the tech that sin has like swallowed up or something.
The grand irony.
Yeah.
That when fighting.
Yeah.
Well, that's true.
Yeah, feel free to correct. Again, I haven't played this game. I don't know. And Andrew does a great job here, but there's more than you could just tell the whole story. But as Ryan pointed out, there's like 14 hours of just cutscene in this game, let alone the actual gameplay. So hard to do a total plot dump here. Like Seymour, I'm like, oh, who's Seymour? When he comes up in this. It's not because you explain things poorly. It's like you explained exactly what you needed to. So yes, we are going to battle a couple forms here, like classic JRPG style. Beginning the battle with you, Yuna has to call upon and face her Aeons, and we hear the track A Contest of Aeons, which contains the militaristic troping, harmonic dissonance of the Unalesca tracks, and more synthetic electronic timbres. I think that one I actually have. Yes, look. Yeah. This one kind of combines a lot of those things that we get the brass from Mika.
Yeah.
Again, I won't play too much of that, just for protection's sake. Mika. Here, okay. And just to look at that one, because these are really beautiful transcriptions, here's that. Showing just how crunchy these harmonies are.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So We get some secundal harmony, displaying narrative conflict, but also we move here, as we may have noticed, to non-human artificial sounds from the human voices. We're kind of desecrating the chant with the tech, right? The machina. And so this version is a pretty literal depiction of Yemen's corruption. We're victorious within the body of sin, ensuring the eternal calm and the removal of sin's presence from Spira, everlasting peace. But that means that the Fayth is dead now. The Fayth is terminated. The Fayth with a Y that provided Anne's and the Dreams Anarchind can finally find peace. So they end up kind of destroying God, destroying the religion as a whole. With the religion no longer serving any functional, structural, or liturgical use, all characteristic topoi that signified its influence have been removed in the chant's final appearance. Yuna ends up performing a final sending for the Anns to allow the Fayth to reach the far plane. About time for all their service, right?
Yep. That's only been 1,000 years.
That's only been 1,000 years. So here's how it shows up in the ending theme. I can't remember exactly when it kicks in. It's coming up, right? There it is. This is super pretty. I really like this version. I love that setting. Obviously, it's a long track because it is an ending track for the game. So good. So now we get to the text, Ryan. Now we get to the cipher. I had to go through its musical transformation before we get to, the hymn itself, like those syllables, what do they mean? The hymn isn't in Latin, but it is kind of created as a lost or a dead language. At least that's how it's presented. Pronounced a lot like Latin would be. And the technique of forming the chant's text relies through a combination of the stylistic origins of Uematsu's theme, as well as the intricate wordplay of scenario writer Kazushige Nojima's text. Ieyui Nobomeno, Renmiri, Yoju Yogo, Hasa Tekana, E Kutamae. So you're like, okay, cool. That sounds cool. What does it mean? This isn't the first time we've done this in Final Fantasy. I'm really glad you brought up Final Fantasy VIII. Thank you.
Had to.
Thank you for your service. Liberi Fatale from Final Fantasy VIII in 1999, which, hey, that's not too much before this, right? Creates a similar Latin-esque text with Fithos Lusec Wecos Vinosec, which is an anagram of succession of witches and love. Very simple anagram, just kind of suggesting the major themes in the game. And if you write, so how do we get to what this one means? If you write each syllable in its own cell, like think Excel spreadsheet, what you get instead of the horizontal left to right reading is the original Japanese text. So for who's taken Japanese, where you can read according to the Tategaki, the vertical writing system of reading from the right column, top to bottom. Let's see what that looks like. And this will reveal the new text, which, if you don't speak Japanese, will still need some translating, but it's fascinating. All right. For plane. Here we go. Table 12.1. Oh, look at that. Isn't that neat? Okay, so in English, we're going to read Ieyui. But if we go this way, we get Inoriko yume mio e bon jui no reyo. And you're like, okay, cool. Still doesn't mean anything if I don't speak Japanese. But this new one means dream, child of prayer, pray to you, Yevon. It's intelligible. How cool. How cool is that? And you can go on and do the rest of the text similarly to get the whole cipher here. So the Hasa Tekanai Kutamai read according to the Tatagaki gives Sakai Tamae Hatanaku, grant us prosperity forever. So we get a real Japanese text that's being rearranged or corrupted to serve as the foundation of the hymn for the Yevan, a reading of the syllables that caused it to be adopted into the temple of Yevan as scripture and given special status as able to soothe the souls of the dead or even pacify sin. So such a clever way to create this. Even in the present day, like where we start the game in Spira, there's no true translation of the hymn, just as the original teachings of the Yevon religion were distorted, mistranslated, or lost. And similarly, though ancient machina is outlawed by the religion, holy places and individuals still have access to it, as we end up seeing. And the dead govern the living. The people of Spira are being sold a story by religious leaders who have lost hope in achieving the eternal calm. Don't worry, we fix it. And then for some reason, we do all this. We achieve an eternal calm, like we're done. Means we've destroyed the religion. And somehow there's a 10-2. Like, really? This is a bit of a digression, but really? Why do we have a 10-2 after all this? We destroyed God. Why do we need another game?
Well,
narratively.
Okay, narratively, it's a failure. It's a again, this is just my biased take on it. Fans were greatly upset with Titus dying and the thought of him only being a dream person, essentially, and they wanted him to be reunited with Yuna, and they continue it with the idea of sphere hunters. Yes, more spheres. Sorry. And Yuna discovers a sphere with an individual that looks identical to him, and she believes that he either still lives or exists in some form. And we go through several hours of nonsense to find out that it wasn't really still Titus. However, depending on how much of the game you complete, again, another failure in narrative and story structure, because the Fayth may be so thankful for all that you've done for Spira, they can offer you a chance to see him again, at which point they're willing to continue dreaming to bring him back. So it's kind of the Harry Potter ending, or the I'm trying to think of other failures in story writing where you don't allow yourself an out, but because you've done so poorly in setting something up that you're like, in an effort to provide fan service, you give yourself this, we'll just give it to you anyway. So
yeah, I just, after all this, it seemed a little odd to me to have another game.
Ryan's trying to salvage it because 10-2 has in the Dress Spheres phenomenal gameplay.
Yeah, he said that he really likes the gameplay.
For the gameplay, it deserves so much more credit. But from a story and narrative perspective, again, from a very biased, cranky narratologist and theorist, it is an abject failure. I'm very sorry, Stefan. But yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, everybody. I haven't played 10, so 10-2 would not be the one to start with either. But if I ever do play 10 all the way through, I don't know that I would be that motivated to go on to 10-2. I mentioned, as I was reading this, I said the exact same thing to Joe. I was just like, why is there a 10-2 if we destroy the religion at the kind of breaks the whole idea of the eternal calm if we have a whole other game, right? And Joe was like, yeah, but I hear this one has a lot of fan service. So it's worth playing for that. Oh man. Okay, so we'll keep arguing about 10 too. I had to start the fisticuffs in the chat.
Yeah.
So, concluding remarks here: religion within Final Fantasy X is a paradox, forms both the foundation of daily life for the majority of Spira's denizens, while affording nothing but the false hope of salvation. At least in this game, in the way this faith has been constructed, and showing the corruption of the institution itself. Right, whatever hope may actually exist has just been shrouded in all of these layers. So that's rough for those folks. The music associated with the in-game religion mirrors this in-game conflict with respect to its internal evolution and its external influences. It creates a narrative that both reflects on its mythological history and foreshadows its own downfall, with some of those like chromaticisms creeping in and things like that. A byproduct of its internal corruption and power struggle is it embraces standard topics and tropes firmly entrenched in filmic and ludic lore, while abandoning its own sacred origins. The original chant creates its own levels of holy experiences for followers and practitioners, evolving in historical methodology yet embracing its dualistic inspirations. Meaning through Yevon, at least for the main party, comes through practice and experience, which dissociates from its Western liturgical antecedents and embraces elements of Eastern practices, in both sound and substance. Haha. There it is. Such an elegant chapter, Andrew. Like, especially, it's one of the reasons I wanted to speak to this sort of unusual process and I'm sure this happens. I just haven't seen it happen before. I feel like generally there's more on the editor standpoint, like the expectation that you might have some author attrition. You might just lose some chapters because, people's lives are complex and things come up, and especially with pandemic and quasi post pandemic, having a lot of issues with that. The idea of like, no, I really need this chapter in this book is kind of an interesting challenge for Rich, and then to find somebody that's willing to pick up that thread and like run with it so elegantly. Like,
thank you.
You did such a great idea, a great job with this initial seed that was given to you.
Much of the initial seed was the very, very basic skeleton of the text cipher.
Mm-hmm.
And even that was a very rough sketch of the cipher that you would find on typical fan sites.
Sure.
And so it was a lot of, can we connect this to the music in some meaningful way?
Mm-hmm.
And so it was just, well, what can I as an analyst add to it? What can I as a narratologist add to it? And this was a very slanted, biased effort to fit something into that predetermined box, essentially.
Yeah. It's just such a surprising project, but clearly Rich really believed in the idea and saw the potential in it, and it seems like he found the right person to carry it forward, because I think this is just, even not knowing the game, I was just really stunned by your analysis and the transcription. Of course, I'm always won over by a good transcription, but your deployment of the the discussion about the Protus Authenticus and the the organum and like all the points. It was really fun for me to follow as somebody who's always a bit of an early music nerd too. That I just thought that was really smartly deployed.
There's
a good reading.
a lot of luck and a lot of hope that this sounds like it might work. Let me test it and see if it works out. Mm-hmm. And as I had mentioned in the chat and with discussing with Pete, because I was working so much with modal harmony and trying to make sure, well, this, so many will want to say that this is modal, and my emphasis of, well, certainly it's not, because there are these elements of modality, because I had just done so much work arguing against modality and having the right resources there to argue against it and to pull up the early music sources that could counter those arguments and strengthen this particular one, which could open then a certain argument for the evolution tied to the history of a given church or to a given religion,
Mm-hmm.
um, helped in that regard.
Yeah. And, a lot of the analysis side of things is not to say that 100% of this is like, it's not necessarily solving a puzzle of what was intended by the
Right.
composers,
No.
right?
And
But the fact that you can have this level of reading just shows the richness of the text that we look at. That like I said, there could probably be the Eastern version of this, looking at all
mhm,
of the resonances with the musical construction from that side of it. But the fact that this one is there, I think, is you present a pretty compelling narrative. I always
thank you.
ask my students, like, well, we can't know for sure. Like, is it at least plausible? Are you convinced by the way that we've set up this argument here? And I am for this one, just doing the listening along and following along with something I wasn't as familiar with. I do think that there's definitely something here.
And I think you bring up a really interesting and important point, at least from my perspective, about analysis in general. And I think it's a position that I take, especially as a transformationalist, in that one of the key things that I look for are patterns. And especially when making a discussion or an argument about analysis, is that I personally don't believe that we should be making a point about the way it is. We're making a position of a reading or an interpretation, and we are backing it up with evidence that we believe that we're finding.
Mm-hmm.
So establishing that this is not a definitive reading, this is a biased interpretation,
Mm-hmm.
framing it in that regard, and laying out our methodology
Mm-hmm.
becomes very important. And so I think establishing outright that this is a very biased reading from this particular perspective. However, from this perspective, this is how I'm reading it. This is what I've gained from it. And if
Mm-hmm.
you position yourself from this, perhaps you can see the same thing too, as opposed
Yeah.
to a definitive, this is how it should be read, or this is the way it is. Um, that's how I found it helpful.
I just think that that's such a good way to approach it. It's like when we find the original sources of, the SNES samples or whatever. Somebody presenting it as like, look at this cool like detective work, like the Matthew Valentes of the world. Like, look at the detective work I did and like how I sourced the actual physical synths and finding these things,
Mm,
and like just that process and being really excited to share it with us versus the clickbait article that inevitably gets posted of like, this is how Donkey Kong Country was intended to sound. Like, I hate
yeah.
that.
No.
Right? Like, it doesn't have to be that. It doesn't have to
No.
be that to be so much more interest. It's so much more interesting than that idea. Um, so yeah, there's an art of interpretation. Ultimately, like we're we have thesis statements. We're convincing each other of our ideas,
Right.
and sometimes they work. Sometimes we come back to them and refine or build on and take them in new places. And it's all a process, which is cool. I really appreciated this one, and
Well, thank you.
I think it's a strong piece. Definitely, if I am teaching, especially if I have majors, I feel like I could throw this at music majors.
Thank you.
My non-majors, I think, might get a little scared by the early music stuff,
Yes.
even though I would be off to the sides excited about it. But I could see assigning this to majors or to a grad class, or to like a theory, like video game music analysis
Hmm.
class, which I don't tend to teach. I think that would be a really cool use of this for,
Thank
just
you.
thinking of those that are teaching or will teach things like this. This is very assignable. Especially if anybody knows 10, then some of the
Hmm.
pros on just the history of the religion is not something like I needed it, and I'm glad it was there. It doesn't assume that I know this game, which I appreciated, and it was really necessary to cover as much of that as you could without.
Yeah,
You can't do the whole plot, but you covered what
this
you
this
needed.
was certainly an exercise in weed eating in various forms. I think it's a good way to phrase it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this was such a fun one. As for what's coming next, I think we're taking a few weeks off. Literally no one's responding to my emails. So, and granted, I could be sending a few more than I am, but we're all fighting a stomach bug right now. Like, I'm just so sick of being sick. So I'll post things if that changes, but let me look at my notes here for kind of when our next official scheduled thing. I think later in April, I'm going to do a couple different things because the animation book publishes on the 26th of April. We should be getting our copies of it relatively soon. We're filling out forms to do that right now. I may give away one because as an editor, I get more than one copy. So, and I get 3. I don't need 3. So maybe I'll give one away to someone that doesn't want to swing the $160 or whatever it's going to be. Again, that's the academic for libraries to buy it. There is an ebook that's going to be available. I think it's like $40, which is pretty exciting that they're launching that simultaneously because normally they kind of wait. But hopefully it'll do okay. Yeah, I know. It's ouch, but the Uematsu book is about the same. So it is what it is. These publishers, I think, are really trying to make their money back. They just haven't seen as much movement, post-pandemic, etc. So we've noticed some austerity in some places, even with like the number of images you're allowed to have. And this is a conversation you can have when you're going to contract with a publisher. But I've noticed some things that I got like 20 images in the RPG book and they had to fight for it. But like, I don't think it was as bad as being told for our whole book. We were told we could have 20 images for the whole book. So I think that some of them are cracking down to try to just serve the academics, but make it viable for them. But try to get the ebook. That's always a good thing. Have the libraries purchase nice copies and go from there. But no one, Lisa and I are not sitting here like hitting up our individual scholar friends like, here, buy a copy of our book. We're both, we're both non-tenure track. Like Lisa's alt-ac, I'm like half alt-ac. Like, I'm adjuncting. So like, I don't have any expectation that any of you would buy this right off the bat, but get your institutions to buy it so that you can take a look at it. But I think what I'm going to do, next month is I want to do a close reading kind of my Dragonslayer chapter. And by that, I mean, instead of just doing my normal summary, because I gave a Nakvigam paper on it this year for those that were there, I think what I'm going to do instead is actually have the chapter up in real time and kind of show how I take notes on a chapter. Do kind of like not a workshop, but sort of just like, what does my process look like? How do I summarize things? A little more interesting than the content per se. Just like as kind of an I was trying to think of some things that would shake up the format a little bit here. I have some interesting things in the works for that. So just to maybe I could share the screen. Window capture. If I have it. Nope, that's not that. That's just PowerPoint again. We don't need that. But anyway, so that'll be kind of later April. I think the 28th will be the first day that on this stream that the book is actually out. So I think we're going to start with Lisa Scoggins' Cuphead chapter. Going through drafts of the editing process. If I can get anyone to agree with that, I could certainly show you guys what I did with mine, kind of in the same breath, like show where I started, because I kind of started that one from nowhere. It'd be interesting to see. I certainly have all of that. So if anybody, when I have them on, we could talk a little bit about what the editing process was like for sure. But I'm going to have Lisa on as my co-editor, who wrote on Cuphead, which is kind of the spiritual successor to Dragon's Lair. They're both cell animations. So that's why I ended up writing on Dragon's Lair, why she ended up writing on Cuphead. We thought they paired beautifully in the book. And then we're going to have Ryan on early May, and we're going to look at his Kingdom Hearts chapter, which I've brought up a lot here. Yeah, Andrew sent. We had to Andrew. We had to work on image quality and a few people that did Switch games actually. Switch, even at its highest resolution, is not high enough for the publisher. So we had some issues where we're like, Switch literally can't do more than this, which was really interesting. So we can talk a bit about that process. So yeah, it's going to be me doing something with my chapter, but probably not a straightforward one. And then Lisa Scoggins' Cuphead, and then Ryan's Kingdom Hearts 3 and musical reuse, which we've talked about a bunch on this channel. And then let's see. And then somebody I'm trying to ask. And then Greg Rossetti's going to come on and actually do a session on transcription, because we all do it. We know I could just run a session on how I transcribe, but I wanted to have somebody else that does this a lot and is really passionate about it. Just like show us in real time, like walk us through all the tools that we use, actually do a little transcription live on camera. So we're going to do some of that. And I thought Greg was the perfect person for that. So Greg's going to be on in May. And then TJ Losnicola and Brent Ferguson are going to come on and do their chapter from the animation book, which is on Carmen Sandiego, because everything in this book had to touch on animation, video games, and music. And if it didn't triangulate somehow between all three, we made sure that it did. So we wanted things that had some kind of a presence, either the literal animation style or had animated series either before or after the game, that there's resonances between the two. So Carmen Sandiego, of course, had a cartoon and was also made into multiple video games. So we're looking at that one, and then I'll see from there who else I want to have on from the book. But then we'll be kind of hitting the end of May, and in June I think I'm going to start the Summer of Summers. So I think April's going to be a little weird, because I have not been able to find people there's a couple weeks that I still have sitting empty, including next week. So I'll keep you all posted, but that's kind of I have stuff further out. I just haven't been able to get people to commit to April with the academic calendar. So yeah, I'll take a break at some point. But yeah, maybe this will be my break. And we will go from there. But that's kind of the update. That's why you haven't seen anything new on the Discord. I'm just kind of trying to get things organized. But yeah, we might take a couple weeks off here, do some, because I have a bunch of things I've read, and I've been like, please be on my channel. And if I don't know the person, that's a cold call. That's hard. That's hard to send those emails. And I try to be like, here's what my stream is. Here's who I am. But you just never know. Is that getting filtered? Because it's like a request. Is it getting filtered to spam because they don't know me? I'm outside of their university or whatever. It's like, maybe stuff isn't even getting to people. Maybe they're too busy. Maybe they don't like my channel and they don't want to be on and they just don't want to tell me. I'm assuming it's the first two, but you never know. Could be. Anyway, y'all can keep publishing. We'll have more things on. I'm never going to run out. I just have to get people to agree to be on. So thank you, Andrew, for spending so much time. I knew this was going to be like a good 2-hour summary here, because it's such a rich, detailed chapter, and there was so much to unpack. So I'm glad we could walk people through it. And thank you all for joining us. It looked like we had a really robust turnout. The chat was really active, it's always fun to see. You can see the passion for this game and the way people were talking about it. So I appreciated that. So thank you all so much for being here, and we'll see you in a few weeks, possibly sooner. We'll see. ? Bye-bye.